What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the second installment of my complete genre collection. If you haven't seen my first complete jazz collection until now, I encourage you to check that out if you are into jazz music. Today, I will be showcasing my complete soul collection. Now, I grew up listening to a lot of hip hop, and the older I got, the more I got curious about the samples in a lot of the hip hop songs, and oftentimes they come from soul music. And so naturally, as a record collector, I gravitated towards soul records. And after doing some research for this video, as well as doing my own deep dives, I've become more fascinated with the genre in general. And so in this video, I'm gonna try my best to categorize soul into different genres, but I've learned that a lot of the albums I wanted to highlight don't fit super nicely into soul, so I'll probably save them for another video. For now, I'll try to keep it into albums that are mostly soul or partly soul. And if by the end of the video, there's a record that I have not yet added to my collection, write them down in the comments and why I should add them to my collection. So with that, let's get started. Now, when I think of soul music, one of the first things I think about is Motown, the iconic label out of Detroit. Now, I've had the opportunity to actually visit my brother who's living in Detroit at the moment, and we made our way to the Motown Museum, the location of Studio A, where a lot of the original Motown records and singles were recorded. And so that was a truly iconic moment. Motown soul is known for their clean production, their tambourine on the backbeat, and their melodic bass lines, with a little bit of gospel influence, as most soul music is. And what better artist to start us off with than Stevie Wonder, who in my opinion is the Swiss Army knife of Motown. He did everything from sing, write, produce, play pretty much every instrument, as well as introduce the Tonto synthesizer, which I'll mention in a bit. But he is probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, artist of all time, especially after doing some research on this video. So Stevie Wonder is known for having a period in his discography called the Classic Period, where he was given for the first time full creative freedom. And some would argue that the first of that series is Talking Book. However, the previous album was where he first had full control. This is one of my favorite albums because it has some of his most iconic songs, such as Superstition, the intro track You Are Sunshine of My Life. And again, here, he did pretty much everything on the album, and front to back, there are no skips in my opinion. So highly recommend this one. While I don't have intermissions, the one that I have next is Fulfillingness First Finale, which I picked up, I believe, in Detroit at People's Records, one of my favorite record shops I've ever visited, so go check it out if you are in Detroit. My favorite song out of this record is They Won't Go When I Go, which has a lot of gospel influence, which I really like in soul music. And again here, front to back, fantastic play. Right after that album, he released the widely acclaimed magnum opus of his career, Songs in the Key of Life. This has to be my favorite album of all time, depending on my mood, and in my opinion, the best double LP album of all time. It's packed with over an hour of music, and again here, no skips, in my opinion. You got songs like Sir Duke, Isn't She Lovely, as well as so many sleepers that I think could be favorites on people's lists. For example, Pastime Paradise, which has been interpolated by Coolio on Gangsta's Paradise, and the list goes on and on. But what's interesting about this record is that it's actually a Spanish pressing, and I noticed that the one track, which I forget the name of, I'll write it down here somewhere. This track is sung partly in Spanish, and I realized that it was pushed up on this release, so I found that quite interesting and really changes the whole experience of this album. Now, after Songs in the Key of Life, his peak, he did have a soundtrack album, which, to be honest, was a bit of a flop, but still not bad in my opinion. Then following that, he released Hotter Than July, where he dedicated a lot of it to Martin Luther King Jr., especially after the assassination, where he basically sings happy birthday to him on the very last track, Happy Birthday. But this is a fantastic album. As the name suggests, it's great to play in the summer as well. Now, after Stevie Wonder, my favorite Motown artist has to be Marvin Gaye. He shifted Motown from a label that was known for their singles to a label that can produce high quality, cohesive albums. And this is what he did on What's Going On. This often ends up on top 10 lists of greatest albums of all time for so many reasons. So this album was inspired by his brother's recent return from the Vietnam War. And so this is a very socially conscious and politically charged album. But what's great about this record is that it's meant to be played front to back in order as the songs blend very well together. And this was one of the first Motown albums where an artist was given full creativity as well. And once you do that, you get something like What's Going On. And if you haven't heard the Detroit mix, I highly recommend it because it's a more raw version and it feels like you're listening to the album for the first time, but a little bit harder to get on vinyl. While I was at the Motown Museum, we ended in Studio A where we saw the bongos, which I believe were played during this album. You can hear them quite often in this record, so that was quite a memorable moment for me. Now, on one hand, Marvin Gaye had a socially conscious side, but on the other hand, he was very well known for his sensual, romantic songs, and so this, in my opinion, has to be the sexiest album of all time. This is Let's Get It On by Marvin Gaye, which leads with single of the same name. Similar to What's Going On, this is a very cohesive album. The songs sound very similar to one another, including the part 2 of Let's Get It On, called Keep Getting It On. Another track that you might know on this record is Distant Lover, which was sampled on Kanye West's Spaceship on Late Registration. Yeah, again, front to back, such a great listen. Definitely a Valentine's Day record if I've ever seen one. So yeah, this is a fantastic performance of Marvin Gaye and his silky smooth vocals. Now, while Gaye and Wonder were known for being iconic solo artists, if there was to be one group to be the face of the whole label, it would be The Temptations. And what I've got here is actually an album that doesn't sound very typical of theirs, as this was more of a psychedelic, funkier, rockier record, Psychedelic Shack. They were known for their polished vocals, wearing the suits, and being very formal, whereas this was a bit more of a rebellious record, including a song called War, which they had to change the lyrics to because it ended up becoming really popular but had some anti-Vietnam War themes, and the label was afraid that they would shy away their conservative listeners. But this is fantastic. It's so funky, it's so gritty, and something so different to what their first albums and songs sounded like, such as My Girl. So I highly recommend this if you're into more gritty soul. Now, released a few years later is this album called Masterpiece, and as the name suggests, it was intended to be a peak or a magnum opus in their discography. While I don't think it was that, it was definitely a highlight in their discography, as their producer Norman Whitfield, this was one of his last albums that he produced for the group. It's filled with these long instrumentals that kind of set a nice groove, especially on the title track Masterpiece, which is just 13 minutes of pure bliss in my opinion. But the group actually didn't like this because their vocals were kind of hidden under all of these instrumentals. So shortly after they released their record in 1990, they actually fired Whitfield, but this was definitely a standout in their career. And the last record I have from The Temptations is their reunion album. This I picked up at the gift shop at the Motown Museum because I wanted a nice souvenir, and they only had a handful of records available. And to be honest, I didn't listen to a single song on this before buying it, but it did disappoint me a little bit. I've come to learn that this actually wasn't super successful apart from the tour that brought them together. So the origin behind this record is that they had a few members that came in and out due to some issues with drugs and other personal issues. And so this is the first time that the original members, as well as some newer members, all got together to produce this album. The leading track, Standing on the Top, was actually produced by Rick James himself, adding a bit more funk to their sound. And so there are a few bangers on this one, but as a complete project, not my favorite. And shortly after, they disbanded because of recurring personal issues. Now, another legend from the label is Smokey Robinson. Now, you might know him for his silky smooth voice, but he was actually at one point the VP of the label and often wrote for some other artists. And so I've got 3 records from his, not super commercially successful albums, but albums that are relatively accessible here, at least in Germany. First one is SR. Can't remember where I got this, but I think this was one of my first Smokey Robinson albums, and I just like his voice, so I kind of wanted to pick something up that I recognized, at least whose voice I recognize. Next one is Yes, It's You Lady, which, if I'm not mistaken, this might be the very first vinyl record I've ever played on a turntable. I was in Bali a few years back, and I remember I entered this record cafe, which just recently opened up, and they had a bunch of records. Most of them I didn't recognize, but I noticed that they had a Smokey Robinson record, so I played it. Love the sound. If I'm not mistaken, that might have been the moment where I thought to myself, I would like to get a turntable for myself so I can play some smooth tunes such as the ones on this album. So shout out to Smokey for inspiring me to collect records. The last one here I picked up at a nice record store in Istanbul during a workation with some of my colleagues. This one features his hit Cruisin', which is the very last track to this album, as well as a pretty nice cover of Get Ready, which was first performed by The Temptations. Now, moving on to the Philly soul sound. Compared to Motown, Philly soul is a bit more lush, a bit more orchestral, a lot of strings in the background, and at times more funky bass lines. While Motown was a bit more polished, I would say Philly soul is a bit more sophisticated and smooth. Some acts you might recognize are the O'Jays, the Stylistics, or Teddy Pendergrass. While I don't have any records from those artists I mentioned, I do have Let's Clean Up the Ghetto, which is a charity record, which was initiated by Kenneth Gamble, one half of the duo Gamble and Huff. Everyone that's featured on this record comes from the label Philadelphia International Records. The record was created to essentially raise awareness and raise money to clean up the inner cities, starting with, of course, Philadelphia. This is basically a compilation of the biggest artists from that label, such as the O'Jays, Teddy Pendergrass, and Lou Rawls. In my opinion, this is a massively underrated album. I don't know why it's not talked about more often. It's such a great representation of Philly soul. It's uplifting while being socially and politically conscious without sacrificing the quality of the music. So if you want a great representation of Philly soul, I highly recommend this record. Next record is from the Ponderosa Twins Plus One. While this isn't traditional Philly soul, one of the band members of the O'Jays actually discovered them and kind of managed this group. They're basically a copy of the Jackson 5 without the same success and legacy, of course. So how I discovered this record was because one of the tracks is Bound, which is the sample to Bound 2 found on Kanye's Yeezus. I heard that there was a bit of controversy with the use of that sample, but it was one of Kanye's most iconic sample flips. And so I found this reissue at the world's largest record fair in Den Bosch, Netherlands a few years back. Before that, it was actually pretty hard to find, but they recently reissued it and I thought it was a pretty fair price. But yeah, front to back, it is very reminiscent of the Jackson 5, but if you do like that cute, childish, soulful sound, this is a great lost classic in my opinion. So when it comes to Southern Soul, I only have one record, but it is from the Queen of Soul herself, Aretha Franklin. Southern Soul can be categorized as soul that is a bit more rough around the edges, with powerful horns in the background, heavy organic grooves, and a lot of emotional intensity, similar to what you would find at a typical Southern black church. And it's very fitting because Aretha Franklin grew up Christian and sung in the choir of her churches. And so this is Lady Soul, one of the best albums released by a female, in my opinion, of all time. It features songs like Chain of Fools, You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman, as well as Money Won't Change You. So this is such a great play, front to back, such a great vocal performance by Aretha Franklin. This was the album that was released shortly after she released the track R.E.S.P.E.C.T., Respect, and this basically solidified her as the Queen of Soul thereafter. Next up is Memphis Soul. Now this is a rather broad category, doesn't necessarily mean they have to come from Memphis, but this is categorized as more smooth, sexy sounding soul. It featured a lot of organ rhythms and some punchy horns as well. And so a great example of some Memphis Soul is Al Green. This is Al Green Explores Your Mind. I picked this up at a record shop in Cologne, whose owner I got to know pretty well just because he was offering a bunch of records for €1 and I made the trip over there and also stumbled upon this record. I love this kind of music because it is both romantic as well as a little bit religious, has some Christian undertones. Front to back, it's smooth, it's sexy, but also very conscious of his faith. Some standout tracks are Shalala, Take Me to the River, which Rolling Stone rated one of the best songs of all time, as well as one of my favorite Al Green songs, God Blessed Our Love, very gospel influenced, so highly recommend checking out this record. Now, another fantastic artist known for his smooth, sexy, soulful vocals is Isaac Hayes, and what I've got here is To Be Continued. While it's not his most commercially successful album, one of my favorite songs from this record is Look of Love, a Burt Bacharach cover, which was sampled on one of my favorite hip hop songs of all time, Can I Live by Jay-Z. Love the horns on that one, and so I discovered it was on this record. It also has a lot of cinematic sounds to it. His vocals are very drawn out, slow, but very soothing. If you like epic songs that are long, there's a 15-minute track called Ike's Mood / You've Lost That Love and Feeling, and it's packed with just luscious orchestral instrumentation. So if you like that, I highly recommend this. It's a very compact storytelling album about heartbreak, love, those kinds of topics. Again here, this is not a perfect example of Memphis Soul, but this is a record from Anita Ward, Songs of Love, who does have some Southern soul roots. This features her hit single, Ring My Bell, as well as my personal favorite, Spoiled by Your Love. She's not a very well-known artist, but I think she is massively underrated. So if you do like that more disco, funky soul sound, I think you'll like Anita Ward. Now, moving forward, I will list some albums which I felt are very soul-like, but I couldn't properly fit them into a specific category, so it'll be a rather miscellaneous group of records. Starting with this Bill Withers classic, Just As I Am. This is such a beautiful listen front to back. This record gives off working man masculinity, but not in a misogynistic way, but a rather respectable way, and so Bill Withers, I think, is one of the most likable musicians out there. This record is filled with hits such as Ain't No Sunshine, Grandma's Hands, as well as a decent cover of the Beatles' Let It Be. This record is a great record to play when you're sipping your Sunday coffee, sun is shining, and you have no care in the world. Definitely check it out if you haven't listened to it yet. Next up, I've got a couple records that I would categorize as cinematic soul. It could be considered jazz, it could be considered pop, but at its core, it does have some soul-like elements. First one is I, Capricorn by Shirley Bassey. Shirley Bassey is often remembered for her contributions to the James Bond films, where she sung some of the lead tracks such as Diamonds Are Forever. This one I picked up for like €1 or €2 at my local charity shop, and it features songs such as The Look of Love, again, the Burt Bacharach song, and it's also on the film Casino Royale. I realized after reading the track list that there are actually songs that are featured in films such as Sweet Charity, Lovers and Other Strangers, Oliver, and Follies. So if you do like soundtrack music with some accompanying vocals, definitely check out Shirley Bassey and this record, I, Capricorn. Next one is a classic in my books. It's Nina Simone's I Put a Spell on You. This features her smash hits, I Put a Spell on You, Feeling Good, as well as some other covers. But while some don't say this is her best album, I think this is one of her most timeless albums. It features the songs that she basically made her own. I don't think any of these are written or original songs by Nina Simone, but there's a few songs, such as the ones I named, where her version has been the most famous, I would say. And so if you do like that luscious instrumentation, some jazz influence, but of course that soulful baritone sound that Nina Simone is known for, then definitely check out this record. This next one is quite an interesting one. So this is Kofunta by P.P. Arnold. I'm willing to bet you haven't heard of her, but she was actually one of the backup vocalists for Ike and Tina Turner back in the day. And how I stumbled upon her was quite interesting. So a few years back, I attended the world's largest record fair in the Netherlands, and she was actually one of the live performers. So she reissued this record in time for that performance, and so she was there signing copies, and if I'm not mistaken, I was the first one to upload this version on Discogs. So if you see this signed version, odds are that was from me. Despite being the backup singers for Ike and Tina Turner, she didn't really have a massively successful career, but this record is basically a compilation of covers from rock bands such as the Beatles, Eleanor Rigby, Yesterday, the Beach Boys' God Only Knows, as well as Angel of the Morning. And her version is one of the more well-known versions of that song. It is actually interpolated by Shaggy on Angel, if you know that song, as well as the Cat Stevens written song, First Cut is the Deepest. So yeah, if you do like those songs and you want a fresh sound of those songs from a female vocal lead, definitely check out this record. Almost done here, but I've got a couple records from an artist that you might be aware of, and that is Roberta Flack. I have Killing Me Softly, which has been covered many, many times. However, she is not the original performer of this song, but I think she is one of the more well-known ones. Of course, there's the Lauryn Hill version, but front to back, she is such a great vocalist. She really puts a lot of soul, no pun intended, into the performances. And so I'm realizing here that there's a cover of Leonard Cohen's Suzanne, which is almost 10 minutes long, but she has such a fantastic voice and very calming, I would say. Another record I found at a local flea market is Feel Like Making Love. And I first discovered the song Feel Like Making Love because it was sampled on one of Drake's early mixtapes. I believe it's the orange cover one, I can't remember what it's called. This album is so soothing. It has songs that can be played all year round that remind you of the seasons. If you need a bit of an uplift in your mood, definitely play this record and I'm sure you will feel better. Last but not least is a more modern record. Now, I was hesitant to show this record because I feel like it doesn't have that typical soul sound. However, it is highly, highly soul influenced, and I think I might save similar records for another video. But this is Black Acid Soul by Lady Blackbird. I randomly stumbled upon this record as I was at Oye Records in Berlin. I was listening to something on the side and her cover kind of caught my eye. It looked retro, but I realized it was kind of a newer record. So I gave it a spin. Very reminiscent of Nina Simone, Amy Winehouse. Her career started a bit later. I think she started to pop off in her 30s. But yeah, she's such a fantastic vocalist, so definitely check her out if you haven't already. Okay, so that wraps up my entire soul collection. I did exclude a few random compilations, but that's basically the majority of the soul music I have. After doing research on these records, I realized that there were so many I could have mentioned in this video, but I'm gonna save it for another video where I might do a combination of funk, jazz fusion, R&B, neo soul. Let me know in the comments if that'd be something you'd be into. But for now, I encourage you to subscribe if you want to see more. And as I mentioned in the beginning, if I haven't mentioned a record that you think I should add to my collection, let me know down in the comments. Feel free to follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and check out my relatively new blog as well if you want to stay up to date on some short form content, including coffee content, because that's also what I do here. And with that, thank you for watching and making this far. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.